And that's why I'm making a spice rack. I had enough offcuts in my garage already to make everything with, so that was super handy. So I'm living with a 1950s original kitchen that has a few quirks. A few years ago I installed a microwave with an extractor because we didn't have a working extractor fan in the kitchen. It left a few nooks and crannies, and I'm using one of them to put the spice rack in now. I used 1/2-inch plywood for the back piece, what the drawer mounts will be attached to. The front and back pieces were 3/4-inch ply, and I used a 1/4-inch plywood for the shelves. So I'm making a 1/4-inch kerf cut for the shelves to sit in, and that takes about 2 passes with my blade. Luckily for me, my wife let me set up my table saw in her laundry, which is kind of cool. Can't hide the fact there's a washing machine behind me, but I'll be working on that actually. I do have plans of making my garage into more of a functional, useful workshop, and hopefully make it easier to film, because the lighting in this was a little tricky, as you might notice. I will improve. This is kind of the beginning. Stick with me, I'll make it worth your while. I have 20 years of carpentry experience, so I've learned a couple of things in that time. I do have a lot more to learn. My kitchen actually is going to be fully gutted and redone because it is pretty decrepit, but that'll be down the line a little further. In the meantime, I'm doing a few little projects in the kitchen just to make it more functional. I had actually just cleaned out my van the day before, and I threw away a piece of brass which I thought would be pretty good for the spice rack after the fact, so I went dumpster diving and fished it out. So I have all the parts made now. It's time just to line it up, put it together, make sure that it all comes together right, doesn't need any tuning, and then it will be ready for the painter booth where I'm going to get it primed. Painting booth, that sounds fancy. Yeah, it's not, it's just some dirt outside. Aside from waiting for paint to dry, this project probably took about 2 to 3 hours, and it only cost me about $10 because all I had to buy were the drawer slides. It's going to have a 2-tone finish with the face frame being a clear-coated curly maple. I used an acrylic clear coat to speed up the process. I didn't get my black belt, so I pulled out my grinder instead to cut the brass. It's actually stainless steel with a brass powder coating if you care. I mean, of course you don't. Our kitchen tile is mint and lemon yellow, so I decided to use the mint paint that I already had in the garage to paint this spice rack, and I really got the dregs out of the bottom of that can. I mean, it was dry when I finished. Then I realized how difficult this install would be in this tight space. I have a 90-degree bit. This is a Craig bit. It actually works a lot better. I had a cheaper brand before, which was a nightmare. It would free spin around. But this Craig 90-degree bit works pretty well, although it was still a challenge because I'm using Phillips screws, and I really don't like Phillips screws. I mean, there's square drive screws and they work, and Phillips screws, they don't. Whoever installed this weird thing left the face frame a little proud of the plywood, so it needed to be chiseled back for the slide. It was me. So I just mounted the drawer slides to the back panel and fit it by itself without assembling it, just to make sure that it worked and it would be way easier to handle. To match the rest of the kitchen, it has a rabbited edge with a 1/4-inch roundover on the face. I only had a 1/8 roundover bit, and I didn't want to blow the $10 budget, so I finished the roundover with sandpaper. Next I had to prime and paint the face frame. You have to pay a little extra if you want to see that bonus footage. So I'm gluing it up, ready to put it together. I had a latex brush that I'm brushing the glue on with, which is kind of new to me. I'm trying to be civilized, but I really just don't like it. I just use my finger. It's so much better to control and it's so much faster. So I will probably stick to using the finger. That's what she said. So I also use a staple nailer to hold it together. I know some people are against using brads or staples for anything, but it just is way quicker and none of them will be seen. I also used a 2-part epoxy to stick the brass on, and also I used some of it just for the face frame, just because why not? I had it mixed up. Also, the epoxy won't drip because it's pre-painted, it's pre-finished. I don't really want wood glue dripping everywhere. So the epoxy works really good for that application as well. I'll have a few more videos coming up on some minor changes that I'll be doing to the kitchen to keep it more functional in the meantime, but sooner or later it will be a full kitchen rebuild, and that should be some good material. I have a pre-existing video of removing a dishwasher, and I built a cabinet in its place. So we don't have a dishwasher at the moment, and that's not the greatest, so who knows, maybe I'll actually put a dishwasher in before we actually remodel the kitchen even. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, just dishes aren't fun. I like working around my house because I don't have to follow a plan, I don't have to follow someone else's design, I can kind of just do it how I felt. And I really just used what I had at hand when I made this spice rack. I clamped a 3/4 inch plywood piece to my workbench to make it easy to get my clamps on, which is something I've never done before, but it kind of worked out alright for something small and lightweight in this particular circumstance. I had to clean up a little excess epoxy with my chisel, and I used a little bit of sawdust to try and stop the face pieces from sliding when I clamped them, but I decided I'd use a little bit of purple tape as well, just so they wouldn't move too much when I clamped. After I had it clamped up, I left it for 2 hours to set. In the meantime, I painted the drawer face so that would be dry, ready for install. So I had the 12-inch drawer slides already installed to the back panel, so I had to just screw them back into the same holes. After installing it the first time, I didn't like the 12-inch slide, and I could fit a 14-inch slide, only just. So I swapped out this 12-inch slide for a 14-inch slide so it would pull all the way out. I don't have that filmed, so imagine that the slide is 2 inches longer. The only thing left to do now is install the drawer face to the rack, and I had a spare drawer pull or two left over from when we remodeled part of the kitchen earlier on. I even used the original screws that came with it, which is quite difficult to install because they were kind of worn out and soft, probably made from brass. But I was able to get them on with my screwdriver. I had to get the hole pre-drilled to the right size so that they wouldn't break. This is a fairly easy and quick project to do, and it was well worth it. I've got a few other small little projects I'm going to be doing on the kitchen, and those videos will be coming out soon, so please subscribe. And there we have it. Spice up your life.